I'm Gerhard, and you're listening to ShipIt.show, a podcast about ops, infrastructure, and the cloud-native ecosystem. Maybe it's the Californian sun, or perhaps it's the time spent at Disney Studios, the home of the best stories. One thing is for sure, Taylor Dolezal is one of the happiest cloud-native people that I know. As a former lead SRE for Disney Studios, Taylor has significant hands-on experience running cloud-native technologies in a large company. After a few years as a HashiCorp Developer Advocate, Taylor is now head of end-user ecosystem for the CNCF. In his current role, he's helping enable cloud-native success for end users like Boeing, Mercedes-Benz, and many others. Big thanks to our partners Fastly and Fly. This MP3 is served with minimal latency from the Fastly Edge location, which is closest to you. Our app and database run on fly.io because it keeps things simple.
This episode is brought to you by SourceGraph. SourceGraph is universal code search to let you move fast, even in big code bases. Here's CTO and co-founder Byung Lu explaining how SourceGraph helps you to get into that ideal state of flow in coding.
The ideal state of software development is really being in that state of flow. It's that state where all the relevant context and information that you need to build whatever feature or bug that you're focused on building or fixing at the moment, that's all readily available. Now the question is, how do you get into that state where you don't know anything about the code necessarily that you're going to modify? That's where SourceGraph comes in. And so what you do with SourceGraph is you jump into SourceGraph. It provides a single portal into that universe of code. You search for the string literal, the pattern, whatever it is you're looking for. You dive right into the specific part of code that you want to understand. And then you have all these code navigation capabilities, jump to definition, find references that work across repository boundaries, that work without having to clone the code to your local machine and set up and mess around with editor config and all that. Everything is just designed to be seamless and to aid in that task of code spelunking or source diving. And once you've acquired that understanding, then you can hop back in your editor, dive right back into that flow state of, hey, all the information I need is readily accessible. Let me just focus on writing the code that implements the feature or fixes the bug that I'm working on.
All right, learn more at sourcegraph.com and also check out their bi-monthly virtual series called DevTool Time, covering all things DevTools at sourcegraph.com/DevToolTime.
We are going to ship in 3, 2, 1.
I remember this as if it was yesterday. I was there front row, actually second row, KubeCon EU 2022, and all of a sudden this very happy person came bouncing on the stage. His name was Taylor. He did exactly the same thing for this podcast. Welcome, Taylor, to ShipIt.
Hey, howdy everybody. Happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
What's the secret to your happiness? You have to tell me.
So honestly, I'd say it's a variety of things, but mostly the fact of being in Los Angeles, the sunshine, the tea, and having two really, really happy pups and partner with me.
Yeah. That's just amazing. Like, I've seen happy people, and then there's you. I mean, you're like a whole other level of happy. And it's like constant, like how do you sustain that? Because obviously things don't go your way all the time. So how do you push through that? You speak to a lot of people, you see a lot of things.
It's easy. I think that it's really good to divide up those feelings with I preface this by saying you haven't seen my GitHub notifications. So there's, that's where I work everything out, and then is in GitHub, and then I'm able to be happy offline. But in all seriousness, I think that there's just been a lot that I've seen throughout my life. I've seen really great interactions, really not so great interactions. And the thing that has really stood out to me has been this concept of really understanding people, being empathetic, getting to see their point of views. And I'm just really curious about figuring out what other people are thinking at any given moment. If there's a disagreement or something that I'm not able to understand from somebody else, I really like being able to sit down with them or speak with them and say like, hey, I really do want to understand your perspective. And once you have that, you're better able to empathize with folks and then kind of see what their core motivations are. In a lot of, more humorously, in other cases, I've talked to some people, they're like, you know what, I just haven't had lunch, or I haven't had a glass of water in like 3 hours. And so it's even noticing these little things that you can just, sometimes the day is really rough. And so you might forget to do something that you normally do. And so that's, and it's really good to keep account of that and focus on what's important and make sure that you're, feeding yourself, nourishing yourself, and doing what's required for you. If you don't have any gas in your tank, it's going to be hard to help others out on that front.
Yeah. I'm seeing like so many things here coming together. The first one, like if I had to do a summary, looking after yourself, knowing what is important to you, making sure, you take care of yourself first, and then paying attention to those around you, paying attention to the little things. There's like so many giveaways of what people need, of what people are actually arguing about. And I think experience plays a part of that too. Now, I'm wondering, I know that in 2016, you were working for Disney Studios, and Disney is, I think, one of the happiest places in the world. Now, were you the same before Disney? I mean, did something happen there just like to make you realize just how, I don't know, serious we take ourselves? Because I think that's like one of the key takeaways from Disney. We just take ourselves too seriously most of the time.
It was really interesting because I was living in Cleveland, Ohio before going to Disney and living in Los Angeles. I really do love it here. The cost of living is definitely up. The sunshine tax is real, but I think that it's just a fun place to be. Cleveland, Ohio, I think is actually ranked second for most cloudy days. And so a lot of people are affected by seasonal affective disorder, or SAD as it's termed, which is a very apt acronym. And so working in a hospital, I got to see open heart surgeries. I got to see, just the complete ends of the emotional spectrum, really happy people, really not so happy people, and going through wild situations. Disney really reinforced that happiness. And so I think that kind of getting to see everything, within that contrast was really helpful for me too. So at Disney, I really learned the art of how to tell a story and what's important to people, how you can really, feel that full catharsis of something that's going on. And, let's be real, it was fun to be able to talk to friends back home and, for them to reach out and say like, hey, could you do a call this weekend? I'm like, no, help and support the Star Wars launch, bummer. Sorry, can't chat, but maybe next week. So
that's a good excuse. That's a good, like, oh, no, please. Yeah, of course. Like, you do that. That's very important.
It's like, may the force be with you. Yeah, we'll talk later.
With all of you, everyone listening. So tell us a bit more. What was it like to work for Disney, and how many years were you there? And obviously, what did you do? Many more questions, but let's start with those.
Yeah, Disney was it was a lot of fun to interview. So what was really interesting, it was at the time my partner was saying that, so she's an artist, she works within it's still really good backgrounds within math and science, but just really is able to articulate herself well within the artistic capacity, so designing logos and branding. And I'm more the, I like computer science and numbers, and so we're really good, opposites do attract. It's a really great match on that front. We have a lot of fun. We have a bunch of hue lights in our house too, so that's like the perfect melding of our abilities. So that's always a fun time. What she had said was that, living in Cleveland, there just aren't these opportunities for either of us, unfortunately, at the time. It was either open source just wasn't the biggest there. It was difficult to find a role in that. And for her, within the artistic capacity, that just really didn't exist. That was definitely more San Francisco, Los Angeles, the West Coast. That's where we've always had our minds on. So we got into a conversation and she said, you know what, we're doing it. And then within the next 9 months, we're going to be in, on the West Coast. I was like, I don't think so. That's wild. 6 months later, we were in Los Angeles. So,
wow. Someone knows how to plan and organize and to push through.
we moved really fast, literally and figuratively. And so it was fun to have that change of pace. It was really scary though, because, all of our families and just like this life that we had known. I've moved around a lot. My partner was mostly within the same space for many years, but I'd moved a lot in my childhood. And so a little bit more used to picking up, moving, changing, and really just kind of looking for a place to call home. And I'm happy that Los Angeles has been that. But the interview process was interesting. I did get to interview with multiple different companies, some in San Francisco, some in Los Angeles. And just, again, that sunshine was just such a great motivator. So it was a bit intimidating to see all these different companies and kind of break out of that comfort zone when it comes to what you're doing for your day-to-day. And so Disney was like, oh my gosh, the imposter syndrome ramped up, and I studied really hard for the interviews and just like prep myself, psych myself up and get ready. I remember going through some big O notation questions in the hotel, like just hours before those interviews and the panel. There was one question that they almost stumped me on pertaining to content delivery networks and like graphics and whatnot, because that is absolutely very big for Disney, as we've seen too with like Disney Plus and whatnot. Granted, that was years before, but that was it was a really, really fun interview process. I felt really good coming out of that interview too, and then was just ultimately very psyched to get that offer letter from them. So it was fun kind of leading up to that. And then starting, it was, again, same intimidation, but I kept leading with the mindset of like, this is fine. I'm going to figure this out. This is a learning opportunity. In life, you can see a mistake as something that has happened and kind of dig into that and just have it circle around your head, or you have this opportunity to take that and say, no, this is a learning opportunity. I can still pivot and move forward. A lot of people think that success is just that, right? It's just success, but it's not true. There's failure laid into that. There are mistakes laid into that. And that's truly progress, is being able to try new things and break through comfort zones and experience that newness. That's where you're going to learn the most, is in those uncomfortable moments, those conversations, those opportunities. So
yes.
That was very much the case, especially moving away from family and all that we had known, and then getting out to Los Angeles and starting something new. As a Disney employee, too, you get that badge that you're able to get into Disneyland as an employee. Granted, not every single day. There are some blockout dates, but that helped too. That helped to kind of really instill the culture.
I can imagine you, yeah. Going on the roller coaster when like work wasn't exciting enough. I mean, I'm sure it was every single day. Okay, I need to go on this roller coaster, just like pump up my adrenaline so that everything is so easy in comparison. So what was your role at Disney?
My role at Disney was senior systems engineer. And so that later became systems reliability engineer, kind of like similar in nature to site reliability engineering. But I started there working within the theatrical distribution groups. So those are the teams that were managing the unlock codes for the movies themselves. So they didn't really handle shipping and distribution like a package or a hard drive delivered to a theater. But the way that it works is really interesting. It's that typically there are hard drives. There's either like satellite uplinks. There are hard drives. It's not typical that there's film so much anymore. The movies get recorded on film, but in most cases, like 99%, it's a digital format. And the way that theaters work is such that they kind of opt into a subscription type of program. So there are unlock codes that are shipped from the studio or the distributor to the movie theater so they can unlock. And it's typically on a weekly basis. And so you can have this hard drive, but it will re-encrypt itself and lock itself so that you can't go and take that home and go watch that movie without having that access code. So if you're lucky enough to have that private yacht and that subscription, that's a really great outcome for you. But that was really interesting. We also had like taxonomies of all the theaters within the world, if they had like 4D time warps or smell-o-vision or IMAX, all these different types of categories. And so first two are fictional, or are they? And so that was really fun to kind of see all the different pieces that came together to handle, just getting the movies in the theater and prepping it for your viewing experience. So I worked with that group for about 18 months and then moved over to the operations team where we reconfigured to really focus on becoming an SRE team. And that's where I started leading from that capacity and interacting with more folks within Disney that, eventually led to further career progression. But I liked that start. Moving to Kubernetes as the standardization for how we managed our applications, because there was so much there were over 300 different application types there, and that's not including different environments as well. If you want, you could multiply by 4. So there's just lots of work to be done. The team at that point in time was like 5 people. And so we couldn't go to each and every application, reasonably, and say, okay, yeah, we can support you, and be told like, oh, we do things a little differently here, different build scripts, different means of standardizing. So we said, nope, let's go to Kubernetes, let's containerize, let's go full in on this. And it was really successful across the board. We got to knowledge share across different teams and sections. So like theatrical with residuals, the group paying out the actors and the performers, along with talent management and hiring. So there were like different contexts and sections within Disney where we would set up Kubernetes clusters, but we'd get to share these best practices or see different ways in which people were using workflows so that we could actually, like, oh, I never thought about that, and get to work with one another to really develop something that would be solid for a longer period of time.
What was it like day to day? Like, did you use GitHub? Did you have your own GitHub Enterprise? What was it like, and like which cloud were you on? All the clouds?
Disney is a huge place, and so asterisk is really like, that's the it depends, very general answer. But on my team specifically, it was pretty split. I think that we really focused on using GitLab, so both options were available to us. And Disney was very good at kind of locking things down. They have to be with movie leaks and everything. When they store pre-release content in the cloud, they intentionally lock themselves out of it. So they have to call the cloud provider if something goes wrong. They rely fully on machine-to-machine interactions with one another. So, and then even, it was really interesting too, because the culture at Disney was very much, the production culture at least, was very much focused on, you had seniority based on how close you were to pre-release data. Your title really didn't matter as much, which was the most interesting part. It was all about how close you were to the content, and that was kind of like how the hierarchy developed, at least in the culture. So that makes sense, especially if you wind the clocks back, 20, 30 years, that makes a little bit more sense, but that's definitely permeated even to, up until the time I left. It might be different now, but that was very much the case then. And just really interesting thing.
How close were you to the content?
If I told you, I wouldn't be able to tell you.
I see.
No, I had some colleagues that worked on the video encoding team, and so I didn't directly work with it, but I'd work with the systems that would interact with those systems as well. So that, or kind of help share.
So this close, basically.
Exactly. Yeah, I could see it. I couldn't touch it, but I could see it.
Right.
But that was a lot of fun. It was interesting too to see how all of the different movie groups went about transcoding and kind of encrypting and dealing with those video files too. So yeah, mostly still very GitOpsy focused. Really was interesting to find out what workflows worked best within the Kubernetes capacity. I know that they, right as I was leaving, they were kind of working through some GitOps frameworks and ideologies. But yeah, I haven't spoken with too many folks since, but I'm curious as to where their cloud native journey has brought them.
Yeah, that's a good. I'm curious too. I'm really curious too. I mean, if you get to speak to someone, or if someone's listening and knows someone at Disney, I'll be very curious to have that conversation just to see what is it like, because our listeners are increasingly wondering, how do the big companies work? How do they run their systems? And what is different there? Because startups, we know so many stories from startups, but when it comes to the big companies like Disney, Microsoft, Google, I know that they're very different, but when it comes to Disney and multimedia and media in general, they're a really big name. Pixar, maybe that would have been like a better name to give in the same category. You mentioned that Disney is really good at telling stories. And I agree. I think they're like one of the best. And they've been one of the best for a long, long time. Walt Disney, oh my goodness me, there's so many lessons there. So if you were to tell one story, a memorable story from Disney, that is related to technology, what would that be?
So one engagement I really enjoyed at Disney was moving into that capacity, running the operations team and transitioning that to focus more on site reliability engineering, patching, immutable infrastructure, working with the platform team and adopting more of their services. And that was where it was most apparent to me, because my manager came to me and said, I'd really like it if you and one of your colleagues did a roadshow and kind of met with different people across different verticals, organizations, and teams. Just really liked, I'd given a couple presentations before, and so was asked like, okay, you seem to like this public speaking thing. So could you go over here and do that in this capacity? I'm like, of course. So got recruited for that. And I really had a lot of fun because there were different platform offerings to talk about, which was really good to do and kind of reframe it from the business perspective, right? So I understood it very technically, but I'm able to kind of speak to stakeholders. And I also understand that context as well, just with prior experience and things I've done within my career. So that was one of the key moments where I realized the power of being able to fuse these perspectives together and then present that as a story and put a lot of puns in there too. So like, as we talked about logging services, there were pictures of trees that had been shot. So yes, tons, like you can only imagine what the puns looked like in the slide form, but they were really good. Shout out to my buddy Steve Wilcox on working with me on that front. But we had our whole like spiel down, our Type 5 performance down. So that was quite a bit of fun. But that was where I saw that really shine through, was because we had some folks that were, either just had a little bit more friction in working with the systems engineering teams. It was the same old silo that you would see with dev and ops, right? Is the developers wanting to move quickly on features, the systems teams wanting to work really, really fast on being compliant with things and meeting, TLS 2, now 1.3, like let's go. And let's do best practices. And then sometimes the app teams can't move that fast because they have other things from the stake. So all of that, being able to have a sense of that and be able to talk to, okay, here's how we can implement these things and then help develop out those products, create more documentation or more reasoning on why that's a good idea. As it really came out of that. So that was the importance that I saw through storytelling across the different groups, as well as making those connections, right? Knowing that like, oh, this person works really well within this area, or being able to connect people together and have them, tell the story of their success to another, or, or failure or misunderstanding within a certain area. Like, I thought containers would do this. I thought containers would never reboot. It turns out they do, and they get moved constantly. It's like, yeah, that's how they work. So kind of that was really good. And then just kind of really bringing the human side of technology to people. I think that it's very easy to get lost in that, or like, I'm right, this is the best way. And that's not always the case. It's not on or off. There is that in between. It's very much it's not a digital thing. The technology being digital is actually very analog when it comes to culture and practices.
This episode is brought to you by Honeycomb. Find your most perplexing application issues. Honeycomb is a fast analysis tool that reveals the truth about every aspect of your application in production. Find out how users experience your code in complex and unpredictable environments. Find patterns and outliers across billions of rows of data and definitively solve your problems. And we use Honeycomb here at Changelog. That's why we welcome the opportunity to add them as one of our infrastructure partners. In particular, we use Honeycomb to track down CDN issues recently, which we talked about at length on the Kaizen edition of the Ship It podcast. So check that out. Here's the thing. Teams who don't use Honeycomb are forced to find the needle in the haystack. They scroll through endless dashboards playing whack-a-mole. They deal with alert floods, trying to guess which one matters. And they go from tool to tool to tool playing sleuth, trying to figure out how all the puzzle pieces fit together. It's this context switching and tool sprawl that are slowly killing teams' effectiveness and ultimately hindering their business. With Honeycomb, you get a fast, unified, and clear understanding of the one thing driving your business: production. With Honeycomb, you guess less and you know more. Join the swarm and try Honeycomb free today at honeycomb.io/changelog. Again, honeycomb.io/changelog.
So after this day, I know that you went to HashiCorp. And did you change your role as you joined HashiCorp, or did it happen after you joined it?
Honestly, it started near the end of Disney. I remember, so that was at the time, it was very stressful, not just for me, but for the world, because that's when COVID really took root and took effect. I think it was probably 2 or 3 weeks after Disney decided, like, nope, everyone's working from home kind of time frame. So like beginning of April, maybe mid-April. But I remember getting an email from the HashiCorp recruiting team, and they said, hey, your profile is really interesting. No, they did it more eloquently. It's like, we've been meaning to talk with you about your car insurance. But no. They
tell good stories. And we need someone to tell good stories. I think that's how it went. We've heard the story. It had your name on it. I want to know more. We want to talk.
Yeah, when you're not at Disneyland, we would really like to talk.
Oh yes. Yes.
They said they sent out an email, and it was, I've gotten everyone, mostly everyone has gotten recruiting emails. If you haven't yet, you will. I promise.
From HashiCorp. Yeah. Do you have to be on LinkedIn? Is that it? Is LinkedIn how they get you?
That's the secret.
All right. So thank goodness I'm not on LinkedIn. Like 10 years, I think I said like, nope, no more LinkedIn. Okay, good. Yeah, that was the main reason. Like all those emails, so many emails. But anyway, sorry, please. You were saying.
It's like unlinked. Yeah, I've got a new network for you to join.
Unlinked. That's it. Yes, please. Yes, please. I'll join that one.
So distributed, no one can contact you. Mm-hmm. HashiCorp reached out and asked about hey, would you like a developer advocate role? Looking at your previous experience, I think this might be something that you're interested in. And I remember sitting there for honestly 2-3 minutes and just kind of rolling that over my mind, and the tumblers were all clicking, and I was going, no, yeah, this makes a lot of sense. Oh my goodness. Because at the tail end of my time at Disney, it was really focused on those interactions with various teams, leading the SRE team, driving strategic things. And so it was really this cross-functional job where I took a look at product, it was engineering, it was product, and just kind of like all these other concerns. Marketing was one aspect of that. So I really saw that at HashiCorp, every organization's a little bit different, when it comes to developer advocacy. Where does it sit? Is it in marketing? Is it engineering? What's the core driving this? So at HashiCorp, it was really nice. HashiCorp has an incredibly strong engineering discipline. So that's like, if it's a character builder, that's where the stats are maxed out, is in the engineering department, 100%. So I was really excited about that because I wanted to strengthen some of those infrastructure skills, working with Terraform. I'd been using it forever. And then really build out that public speaking tenant, right? Because I loved doing that at Disney. It made a lot of sense for me to go into developer advocacy because I loved talking with people and seeing that spark in their eye when they understand the concept or the topic, seeing them come in confused and leaving with I get it now. That is truly, that's what makes me so happy to see and to be a part of that joy. And being able to do that with so many other folks that I was over the moon at the possibility for that. So it was a long interview process of over about 6 weeks, but was happy to finally get that offer and then to get started there because, what's better than helping people out, learning as you go, and then sharing all of the things that you learn.
Favorite moment at HashiCorp? Do you remember it?
Yes. So when I got started, my first week was just before HashiConf for them. So it was obviously a digital event. And so most of the team wasn't able to kind of jump in and help out, but understandably so, right? They're getting ready for a conference. One of my colleagues was emceeing, and so I got a lot of time to read. So immediately, also a very strong document written culture there. So being able to look at RFCs and see some of the initial ones from 2014 that Mitchell and Armand had worked on, incredible to get the experience to be able to read that and go deep and again, understand those motivations, see what's going on, what's in your head as you were designing this, developing this. a document does so much. It's like a picture of the Grand Canyon or another natural wonder. It's like you get a sense of it. It's not the full thing. It's not like being there, but you kind of get to see those motivations, which is really cool. And then I remember hearing like, oh yeah, have you heard about the secret projects we're working on? I'm like, wait, what? They're like, yeah, we're going to be releasing 2 new products coming up here in the next couple months. One is Boundary, one is Waypoint. And the Waypoint one's focused on Kubernetes and kind of like that Heroku PaaS workflow in the cloud. I'm like, this is awesome. So getting that, and then just having it be incredibly accessible to go and work with that team and talk with them like, hey, I've contributed to Kubernetes. I really want to get involved in this and would love to speak with y'all. So met really, really talented, really wonderful people on that team and just immediately got to work with them, pair that with Terraform, do some really fun and cool demos. Again, memes involved. They may or may not have involved Obi-Wan and hello there, that meme. But it's updating images so that GIFs could actually be in motion. So really, really fun stuff. But I think that was kind of the immediate joys as far as working on that team. The developer relations team is just incredibly empathetic as well. So some of those people I just haven't had as profound work relationships with people before going to HashiCorp too, because these people, being in the community space, they also have to understand the highs, the lows, the social nuances, understand product, understand media training. You can't just rattle things off. You have to think about things sometimes. What might make sense to you might not make sense to others, and just all of those things as well. So in developing out those skills, I really liked working with those people and still keep in touch with them regularly. They're all fantastic, both current people there and alumni, just absolutely wonderful to work with.
And then after HashiCorp, you went into CNCF. How did that happen? First of all, what prompted you? Was there a pull? Did you just, come up with the idea? How did it happen?
So I'm a big fan of Dungeons and Dragons, and I just roll this 20-sided dice to make my decisions. No,
Microsoft, CNCF, Google. Okay, let's see. Yeah, okay.
So like, try again later. What does that mean? So that one's really interesting. So at HashiCorp, it was. When was that? So I was just coming off of going to AWS reInvent. I gave a talk about Terraform, the CDK for Terraform, and was like honestly feeling on top of the world, getting that opportunity to speak to so many folks. Things were coming back in person and being able to speak with people directly, granted still with masks, but was really good to have those kinds of interactions and like see a person in front of me and speak with them.
Not just a head. There's more to it.
Yeah, it's like, you're not in 2D anymore. What's happening? You're not an iPad on wheels. Oh my goodness. I loved being able to see people, and coming off of that, it was a little bit more of a quiet period of time too. HashiCorp had just IPO'd in the beginning. I think it was December 8th of that year too. And then Priyanka reached out to me about, I think it was like the 19th of December. And so, reaching out and said, hey, I have this potential opportunity for you. Would you be interested in talking? And, getting to work with the CNCF before and knowing Priyanka from the Kubernetes space and other CNCF capacities, I was like, you don't say no to a meeting with Priyanka. Of course, I'm absolutely going to have this conversation. So we were able to meet up in January over Zoom, not in person, and kind of talk through what the role needed, what the focus was. And the way in which she painted it was perfect. It was still my heart is always going to be within the community space. And so getting to, again, help people out, help educate. I'm in charge of the end user ecosystem. So getting to work directly with people using these CNCF projects, tools, workflows, people that aren't directly aligned with vendors, and kind of pushing things from more of that feature perspective. Like, let's talk about usability. Let's talk about what is really working for these companies, what is not, and getting that feedback back to the right people. So again, getting to employ those skills was something that Priyanka talked about being incredibly important. And then being able to work with these open source communities and the Kubernetes project and so many others within the CNCF landscape have been very close to my heart. I've just had the most experience within Kubernetes so far. But, WASM and Prometheus and all these other things that are upcoming and worth focusing on. I'm excited to jump into those too, but really great to be back working with my friends within the open source space. And so I weighed that. I was really happy at HashiCorp. And to me, that's been one of the more difficult decisions I've had to make in my career, was because you have this, an IPO is good. That's a move in the right direction, Others, the economy right now, question mark. But when it comes to everything like that, that's on how you define progress. That's, in most companies, that's a good move forward. And so, especially depending on what you want to do. And so weighing that was really difficult, and kind of seeing like, okay, I could go and do this for, X more years. I really like the space and getting to work with people, or I can go and learn more skills when it comes to the open source space, but maybe less so, when it comes to Terraform, all these other things I've worked with for most of my career. And so finally, spoiler alert, I'm at the CNCF now. Sorry, if you didn't read the book or watch the movie, but I'm so happy here. And I really, someone once told me that life is the problems that you choose to put in front of you. And so, not a negative implication at all, but I think that when it came to, I took a really hard look at seeing, does it make sense for me to look at infrastructure through this lens for the next, 2, 4, 6, 10 years, or does it make sense to kind of zoom out a bit, interact with more people and lead things more strategically, take a look at all the different ways in which people are accomplishing their infrastructure needs, goals, working through their problems. Are there any really novel ways in which people are trying to solve these things? Seeing even the scientific community take a look at some different use cases there. It's really incredible. I got to talk with Ricardo, who's on the program committee for Kubernetes, and talking about some of the organizations that use like CERN and others that use Kubernetes. He gave me a shout out to another group that's actually using Kubernetes in their space telescope. Like, that's wild. That's so cool. So we've heard about stars on GitHub, but actual stars, mapping those out and looking at those with Kubernetes, that's incredible.
Which group is it? I mean, that's really interesting.
I'm blanking on the name, but still have
James
to have
Webb, by any chance? Is Kubernetes in James Webb?
Yeah,
At least one cluster.
Yeah.
Octocat.
But yeah, still looking forward to having that conversation. I think some folks are on summer vacation on that front, so still waiting to hear back on that. But
it is the middle of the summer as we're recording this, so things are a bit quieter. Everyone is preparing for summer. This is me basically preparing like the whole summer schedule out. We're just talking about that, like how amazingly busy KubeCon was and how many great conversations I've had. And like, I think this is like 5 out of 15, which I'm waiting to have on Ship It. As the blog post promised, I'm like making slow progress, but I'm making progress nevertheless. I'm so happy, to be talking to you now. And one thing which I did notice at this KubeCon, and maybe I was paying more attention, but I don't think it's just that. I've seen a lot more end users be open about their Kubernetes journey and their cloud native story. So Mercedes-Benz, I was talking to Jens, I was talking to Peter, Sabine. No, it was just Jens. They were all three on stage. But that was like so inspiring to see a car manufacturer like Mercedes-Benz talk publicly about how they use Kubernetes. I mean, that was just so inspiring to see. Boeing was there. A couple other names which I don't remember. Like these two were like, wow. Like I was just like thinking about the possibilities. Did you have something to do with that? Like those end users talking about their success stories, coming forward, just like being more open. How did that come to be?
Yeah. So I got to, when I started at the CNCF, that was like, I think it was like the beginning of March. And so a lot of those conversations were already underway. Jörg Schuler is somebody that I work with really closely over at Mercedes-Benz and their technical innovation group. And so really, like, they are absolutely working on some incredibly cool things and getting to see incredibly cloudy. Future is very cloudy. And so that's cool. And there's an InfoWorld article that has done really well in kind of talking through their 900 plus clusters and how they manage them and maintain them. It's been interesting to hear conversations, to talk with them, have those conversations and hear about their use cases of, do we go to a managed service? Do we build this on our own? And so I'm having conversations with them now around those things and getting to, and I, like you said, I love the openness. I think that we're finally coming into that age of understanding, the importance of vendor neutral discussions. There's this concept of Chatham House rules. In some meetings, for those that aren't familiar with that term, it's about meeting in a place and not citing or attributing credit to something. So if I go and say like, hi, my name's Taylor and my social security number, my secret password is XYZ, you could go and say like, oh, Taylor keeps his password over here, maybe in one password, or someone keeps their password over here, but you can talk about the things that you've spoken about, but you can't cite them directly or be like, Amazon's planning to release Infinidash in Q5, so that's kind of the intent there, is to make it a more safe space in which to be able to share this information and to realize that as we work together, we're able to accomplish a lot more. It doesn't feel like the world's on your shoulders. You're able to kind of pair with others and to everyone take a little bit of the problem with them to solve. So, which is great. I think before when we had talked, there's that analogy of, having a party and then just one person or a couple people cleaning the dishes afterwards. And it's like, no, let's automate that. Let's all get together and figure out a way where everyone washes one dish, and then it's a lot easier workload. So I've been really happy to see that.
It's more fun. It's way more fun. Like you're part of the party in different ways. It's not just like showing up, having all the fun and bye, see you. When is the next one? I don't know. You're not getting to know. I'm not telling you when the next one is, Just like, being a nice, and not like nice, like a considerate, kind member. I don't know, like I'm looking for a word, like you're part of a community and you have a responsibility. You have a contribution to make, and if you just want to take, that's not going to be a fun experience for you to begin with, because we know how to handle people that do that, and that's one thing which I've noticed, this maturity that has been developing in the CNCF, in the cloud native ecosystem, and it's been so nice to see how there's all these checks and balances to keep people improving and doing the right thing, and sure, mistakes will be made. No one's perfect. But how do we talk about those? How do we address them? How do we improve? And is it genuinely improving year on year? And I have to say, I like what I'm seeing. And it's been a couple of years now. Now, you mentioned something really important about the openness that those big companies are just showing. And people may think, oh, well, why haven't they been doing this 5 years ago or 6 years ago? Well, guess what? They started doing this 8 years ago, and they're only now at the end of the process. It takes a really long time to make a change as big as this. And I think that's what many don't appreciate. The other thing is we just need to figure out what the rules of the game are. And as you've mentioned, how do we meet? How do we collaborate? How do we communicate in a safe way? So how much of this is on your mind day in, day out? How do you create these safe spaces? How do you create these frameworks? Like where do you even start? Because it's a huge, huge topic.
So funny enough, literally, I'm not joking, this is 100% true. The past 4 nights, I have had dreams about being at KubeCon Detroit and meeting certain people and interacting. So like, it used to be that I dreamt in code and working on things. Now I'm dreaming in community and KubeCons. So yeah, I don't know what my...
That's next level. Wow.
I don't know what my health professional would say about that, but...
Invested? You need a holiday or two? You're enjoying it too much. That's what it is.
It's like, I can't wait.
Yeah.
All that to say, it is absolutely on my mind all the time. It's honestly on my mind all the time. And I really like you said, driving that sustainability and having everybody kind of pitch in and be open and be a part. I think that we're going to see more of that too, as, again, with the economy going up and down and people looking to sustainability. How do we become a little bit more actionable when it comes to cloud cost and running workloads, gaining more certainty? That's always our goal, is to kind of gain that certainty. And that takes a while, right? There's a lot of things that we have to test. And if you're a company that has to do that, on your own, I would say it even takes longer. Nicole Forsgren with, starting up the Dora group and releasing that Accelerate book. Oh my goodness, it was so great to see how she paired together what sounded like best ideas and what people were like starting to prove out, to just completely take a scientific approach and say, here's the data. Outsourcing, if you do that, it actually leads to a lower return because you lose context around interacting with team. Like all of those things couldn't have been shared or shown without working with multiple groups of people. So, as we work together, we were able to spend a lot more time collectively on these big problems and unravel them. What seems like what might be a long time to figure it out. Yes, but I would argue it's even longer when you don't band together. If we try to figure out what we want for lunch, we might never figure it out. But
and not having a support group, I mean, you just do not have the energy on your own to push through. Like at some point, it gets so hard to say, you know what? Whatever. Like I'm like after 5 years, I'm done with this thing. It doesn't work.
Yes.
And that's exactly when you need someone else to tell you, but yes, it does. And let me show you this. And let me show you that. Oh, actually, it's not so bad. And before you know it, you're like at the next moment where you say, this is just too hard. And then someone else tells you, well, no, it's not. And let me show you this, that, and the other.
Exactly. It's about developing that trust and finding these people so that you can kind of even sub out, like, okay, I'm really in it. Like I'm in a good season of my life, or this is the right time to really dig in and focus on this. And then after a while, like life's what happens when you make plans, right? So as things come up, being able to shift over and have that trust and build that relationship with people to say like, okay, well, John Smith really is good at this, Alice and Bob, I know I can trust them, so being able to hand things off appropriately just makes a lot of sense too. But I really do feel like that openness is really what's going to drive a lot of great things for all of us, and kind of rethinking what's important to specific teams or companies. Bigger organizations are looking at frameworks in which to employ a lot of these things. Smaller companies are looking for like, how do we unlock our full potential? How do we solve this either this one problem or this handful of problems that we're trying to work through as we get market adoption and figure things out for our company, right? So the perspectives are always different, and kind of seeing the innovation steps is also really cool too. I think that, like, again, most of the innovation comes from these end user companies. That's where the true innovation happens. It's not typically in building out the feature. It's not in, that's because of all of the usage, right? And they're like, hey, this is really difficult. I need this to happen. Or like, hey, wouldn't it be cool if, and then, insert that situation there. So
there's something new which I haven't seen until now, and I'm really liking it. The transparency reports that came after KubeCon EU 2022. How did that come to be? Because that, again, I haven't seen this before, and there's like so much data, facts, numbers, graphics, infographics. It's really clear for anyone what happened, what it looked like. Tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, so that's one thing that I've really liked about the CNCF is kind of releasing those numbers. There, in the past, I think that there have been transparency reports mostly focused on attendance, where people are coming from, and then every single iteration that comes out, it's a little bit more refined, or there are more data points to focus on. So I especially liked this one this time around, and the CNCF site has been rebranded. The logo actually just got a new splash of paint that makes it a little bit more vibrant. I may or may not have updated the the YouTube channel. So still a couple other properties to update, but I love how like electric it feels. It's also on Slack too, if you want to take a look. But yeah, if it seems a little bit brighter, it's because it is. Mm-hmm. And so thanks to the design team on that. But
it needs to be, yeah. More happy.
It's great. It's great. It makes me smile when I take a look at it. But yeah, taking a look at the transparency report, I've liked being able to see like here that's what this is all about, right? As like you said, so let's try new things. Let's see what works or what doesn't. We noted that when kind of sharing out this transparency report, there are some folks from other communities like LATAM, that area and South America, and saying like, hey, we have folks here in Brazil. We'd really like to have an event here. And so trying to balance that out, people south of the equator, typically like in India or Israel or Japan, there are different groups, and Australia. There are other groups that have said like, hey, we would really like for this kind of interaction with y'all. Because I love that this is my job. I get to sit down and talk with people about, like you really want this. Let's sit down and talk about how we can make this happen, or let me understand your concerns. Let's figure this out. There's a solution here. Let's find it.
I actually work with someone from Latin America, from Argentina and Uruguay, two people, and they were saying the same thing. Like, why isn't there like a bigger presence, CNCF, Linux Foundation in Latin America? And we want to get involved with this. So I have two names for you. One specifically, Marcos Nils. I'm going to say it like, here on the show, because he's asking me about these things. Say, okay, well, let me see if there's someone for you to talk. And this is perfect, because I think there is a huge opportunity here, and we're seeing it in the numbers. We're seeing it like there is demand for it. Let's make it happen.
Yes.
I love that idea.
Exactly. And that's truly, the CNCF operates really well with like, let's see the data, let's make that decision. And so it's really easy to pitch that or advocate for that when you have that data to be able to show too. It's like, clearly, ergo, let's go. So I'm really excited about that too. And in the interactions and conversations I've had with people has been such that they have said, every country is different. Spoiler, and it makes complete sense. And some have, are better able or suited to be able to provide travel and other things. But the case is, even in America, that's not the case. It can be difficult getting approval to go to a different state or region, Midwest or West Coast, whatever it might be. And again, with the economy coming in pretty hard, budgets for that might start to dry up. If inflation keeps rising, everything else keeps happening. And so, I would say it's really on the CNCF and us to be able to find out ways in which to connect people and provide. We're to be good stewards of the community and make cloud native be ubiquitous, right? So kind of trying to drive towards that, definitely want to make things happen. So the conversations I've had with folks on there before I sidetrack myself again is kind of on people don't get that opportunity to migrate and move, and they do want to network and meet with people. Most of the KubeCons, I felt really bad. My first KubeCon, it was in San Diego, and I had all of these talks picked out to go see. And I spent most of my time in the hallway track because I was just starting to contribute to Kubernetes. And I was just like, I was really giddy and happy to see all of these folks that I've only followed online or worked closely with. And I'm like, you're here. It's just like, it was like summer camp. It was just like a really great opportunity.
I know what you mean.
I came back and they said, well, what about the talks? I'm like, they're online. It's okay. So not to diminish the talks at all, but it was nice to have that time and that networking ability, even see the people that gave the talks later on and be like, oh, I wanted to see your talk. I'm going to watch later. I promise. How are you doing? And getting to talk with them about different aspects of what you're working on was just so much fun.
This episode is brought to you by our friends at Retool. Retool helps teams focus on product development and customer value, not building and maintaining internal tools. It's a low-code platform built specifically for developers. No more UI libraries, no more hacking together data sources, and no more worrying about access controls. Start shipping internal apps that move your business forward in minutes with basically zero uptime, reliability, or maintenance burden on your team. Some of the best teams out there trust Retool: Brex, Coinbase, Plaid, DoorDash, Legal Genius, Amazon, Allbirds, Peloton, and so many more. The developers at these teams trust Retool as their platform to build their internal tools, and that means you can too. It's free to try, so head to retool.com/changelog. Again, retool.com/changelog. And by Flatfile, the leading data onboarding platform for teams who don't want to build yet another CSV uploader. Think of the last time you had to import data from a spreadsheet. You probably got some weird errors. You had to try a bunch of things like removing blank titles from rows and column headers. You probably had to find and replace special characters. You might even have to reach for Google to remind yourself yet again how to save with UTF-8 encoding. Here's the thing. You're just trying to get your file where it needs to go so you can do the thing you're trying to do in the first place. And your customers run into this same issue when it matters most, right after signing up for your product and getting started. The thing you're building, the product, is brought to life by data, your customers' data, the data they recognize, and every minute they spend trying to fix a spreadsheet, just like you were doing, is 1 minute less seeing the magic of the product, the thing you're building, the thing they just bought, and they're so excited to use. Now, companies of all sizes struggle with this issue. They don't realize that there's a solution out there, and they've accepted this as par for the course, optimizing for other ways to improve the customer experience. Some go as far as creating downloadable CSV templates and building their own in-house file importer. Then they send their customers to a lengthy knowledge base article on how to use it, and it just circumvents the entire process of getting started. Enter Flatfile. Flatfile is the data onboarding platform built to take the acute pain out of importing customer data into your product. With Flatfile, your product's experience is world-class on day one. It's built to handle everything from data mapping, field validation, and is meticulously designed to blend right into your platform. It turns a frustrating process for everyone into a delightful first experience for your customers. Flatfile is SOC 2 Type 1 and Type 2 certified, GDPR compliant, and even HIPAA compliant. This ensures no matter where your customers are in the world, they're sharing data securely and in compliance every step of the way. The next step is to learn more and check them out at flatfile.com. Again, flatfile.com.
So I know that there's the CNCF survey. I think it's still open. How much of the CNCF survey contributes to the transparency reports and other data that you share with the community?
So we're really starting to ramp up on that front, which is exciting. So there's the transparency report, which is just kind of like about KubeCon and that overall attendance, different areas there. There were co-located events too. And there's little transparency reports for those as well. You know, like what was the percentage, how diverse was this, you know, and where did people come from? All of those same kind of similar aspects of the main transparency report are there as well. And so those have some really interesting insights too. Like I think just, you know, anecdotally, conjecturally, I was looking through some of them and looking at like Cube AI Day, KubeCon, the artificial intelligence co-located event, that seemed to be the most diverse one. And that's kind of mirroring what I've seen and people I've spoken with within that space as well, which is just really exciting for me to see and to get to experience too, because I love seeing all those different perspectives. It does feel old and it doesn't feel fresh when you have that, like, everyone thinks the same, this is all fine. It brings a new vibrance to it when you have a lot more perspectives and voices flowing. So that's been nice. A couple more reports that we're doing are kind of like micro reports based on the telco industry and all of these other focuses are starting to come out too. And we've seen a lot of value from that. Like, instead of making a big report like we have out right now, we don't have to wait year to year for that. We can actually go and take a look at a specific area, say GitOps, AI, observability, what have you, and get, you know, more just quick insights off of folks from that front, and then kind of help cite that for other projects, and they can use that as guiding principles as part of their strategies. Most of the projects understand, you know, they're made up of community members and people facing these problems and people that are really dedicated, you know, so they get a good sense of that, but this helps add a little bit more clarity in the ability to cite those things or to make calls to the community for like, hey, we are working on this thing. We'd really like your help, especially like we want to go in this direction. We don't have the expertise or the people or subject matter experts. We need more. We'd love your help. And so it makes that kind of easier as well. The Linux Foundation released an open source jobs report recently too, back when I was in Open Source Summit in Austin, Texas. And I was really stoked to see that come out because tons of information that was easily citable there as well around, you know, all these groups developers are looking for these open source jobs, you know, so if you're able to offer that as an organization, you're going to have people knocking on your door and wanting to join in, because it's something that people are seeing as really helpful for their career in mentorship and growth. And again, you don't always get that if you're not working on open source. If it's this closed proprietary focus, you know, you might be working on that for 5, 10, 15 more years, and then just kind of not really diversifying even your own kind of career workflow studies, etc.
Yeah. By the way, there will be quite a few links in the show notes. You can go and check them to all the things that we're talking about. So you can go and check them out. How was the OSS Summit North America like? What was it like for you, and what were the highlights? I've heard of it, but I haven't been paying close attention.
I just actually wrote a recap on that. So funny enough, so timely. But I think that it was my first time going as well. So I've always kind of seen it advertised. I've always wondered about it. And so I finally got the experience and got to go. I really liked how it was broken up. It was actually in the same venue that I went to my first HashiConf in 2017. And so it was multiple levels. So you had keynotes on one level, the expo hall was on another. It was really nice because, you could actually swing your elbows around and actually like walk about. It wasn't like a more crowded feeling conference where you can't take a step forward without bumping into somebody. So you could have more candid conversations with maintainers and other folks that were there. It was a really good mix of people that were, either vendor folks or open source folks, maintainers, contributors, end users. Just again, a really good spread of people to talk to and to meet up with. So I really had a great time. I think some of the takeaways for me were understanding, again, kind of coming out of COVID, again, getting into that feel again of going to conferences. There's a person, Melissa from GitLab, that I got to meet, and she shared a love note to open source. And it was a video of people sharing who their mentors were and what their experiences were. But seeing things like that just really made me happy to see that people were getting such value from working in that space. And that was kind of like the overall feel and flow of being there.
Okay. Were you able to watch any talks in person when you were there?
Yes. I saw one that was absolutely fantastic by Julia Ferrioli. And she spoke about really just like areas that we can really improve on when it comes to open source and navigating our way through it. So she brought up really great topics around, what is the shape of an open source community? How do you go and find these people? If it's a security concern, how do you find that? If you want to take a look at this, if you're doing research, who do you interact with? And so kind of suggesting that there's more metadata, there's a lot more information that we can add to repositories to enhance this ability, to make this discoverability, this findability a lot better place. And so I really, really appreciated, as I always do, Julia's talks always kind of I told her it's like it blows up my brain and reconstructs it in a completely different way. She had a really good talk at GopherCon, I think it was 2018, talking about accessibility in Go. And so people using screen readers to program and how, adding that extra carriage returner, that space actually can make it really difficult to understand where the code is going. So again, just new perspectives. And so I really, really liked that. So that was one of the talks I really enjoyed most of all.
Nice. So just to switch focus now again to the end users, we can go for the CNCF ecosystem, but even bigger, there's open source, and open source is huge. Which end user stories you feel inspired by right now?
I think the one that I feel most inspired by right now, there's two. Yeah, two
is fine. Two is fine. Yeah. Let's go for two.
Yeah, it's like, yes, good. So the two that I'm really enjoying seeing are Argo with Intuit, and just seeing how passionate that they have been around driving that project and just like developing out the different patterns in which people can use that. So getting to see like, oh yeah, when you, and just kind of understanding the flow of things too. Like the Flux project, I like that as well. That kind of pairs more mentally with me and the infrastructure focus. But Argo follows more of a developer workflow experience. So and they're both CNCF projects, right? So they're both, and we don't pick winners, we encourage that because it's good competition. It's finding out ways in which to kind of solve this problem in different perspectives, different ways. And I really like how Intuit's really leaned into Argo and adopted that internally. They're working very closely with the community to help drive changes that people want to see. They came up with this app of apps pattern as far as like configuration. So like, this doesn't work for us. Can we have something else that is a little bit more easily swappable? Sure. And then coming up with that and other kinds of different aspects of that project. So I really like seeing that. And I've also liked what Spotify has been doing with Backstage, and kind of like, again, similar to what Julia was hitting on at Open Source Summit, was this discoverability, this pluggability. How do we do that? Does it make sense to have a platform? Does it make sense to, put that into the repo itself? Where should all of these things live? Should they live everywhere? And so I've really liked seeing what Spotify's done there and kind of helping to drive adoption on that front and being very responsive on, hey, this plugin would be really helpful, or we'd want these things loaded in via core. That makes it easier to adopt, and just like being responsive and fueling those things. I think with some, it's hard with an open source project to prioritize things and to be actionable on all of the things, like I don't think it's changed the more I've worked for open source in an open source capacity. People have come to me and said, what about PR number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and like, why isn't that closed yet? Why isn't this issue updated? And it's like, we're either it's not priority, we're working through it, or there's a reason. So that's something that you definitely see a lot more within the open source and other capacities. If your code is public and there are open PRs or issues, people absolutely will contact you about them. So
yeah. So you just gave me 2 new conversations which I need to have, because Backstage keeps coming up and Argo CD keeps coming up in so many various conversations. It's obviously something that people is on their mind. So I really like that. But I'm wondering about users, companies such as Mercedes-Benz, Boeing, any users that just use all this technology and they're like fairly big. Any stories that you're inspired by in that category?
I think the Mercedes one really resonates for me, and there are so many more that I still need to read up on. Frankly, I think that there are case studies on the CNCF website, and so those are really good. Not all are from member companies, but that doesn't mean they're not using these products or technologies. They kind of walk through those. So if you want to like a deep dive, those are really good to check out. I've really liked getting to work with Mercedes and speak with them around those concerns of, does a managed service make sense? If we want to go multi-cloud, what does that look like? And just kind of, again, how open and awesome they've been on that front too. So I like how they're fearless in asking the questions, right? Because I feel like I dealt with that quite a bit at Disney, where you would have folks that had a principal title, senior title, staff title, and they had been there for 20, 25 or more years. And so as the cloud has come in and these new responsibilities, methods, frameworks have come in, there's this humility that comes with that, is saying, I don't know that, or that's a new way of thinking. I might be principal in this aspect, and I got that this many years ago, but there's been attrition that's happened, or misunderstanding, or just like, I haven't kept up to date with that. I think that ebbs and flows throughout everyone's career, honestly, but it takes that humility and just being honest with yourself. Like, I don't know Rust. I want to learn that personally. That's a journey I'm on, getting better at technical documentation. I've got some Google courses that I'm going through on that front too. So learn with me, please. I feel like normalizing the fact that no one's an expert. Everything is constantly changing. If we don't keep learning, we're just going to all be noobs anyway and not have a full understanding. So let's be plastic. Let's keep learning together where it makes sense and where it's interesting, and let's share those stories. So I think that folks have kind of fallen into the, once I'm at this level, I'm done. I know everything. And there's that lack of wanting to say, I don't know, and trying to find out how to include those people or encourage them to adopt that humility. It doesn't have to be an intro to cloud native. It's let's have a lunch and learn about cloud native. It's figuring out the right framing of that too, and kind of working with people that might not have discovered that too. So I really like that these organizations are being so open and driving that, not being afraid to ask those questions, and really pushing for come on, it's like if we don't know where we're going, we're going to figure it out. Come on, let's get in, let's go.
Because you mentioned about learning and resources, one thing which caught my attention on the Linux Foundation website, there's a whole training section. There's a free training course. Anyone can do this. It's called LFS 182X, because you mentioned the PR, long numbers. But what you want to search for, it will be in the show notes. Securing your software supply chain with Sigstore. I know that Sigstore and supply chain is on many of your minds, you being the listener. So there's this course. I haven't tried it out, but I'm tempted to enroll today and check, what does it do? Because Sigstore and Kosan and Fulcion and Raycore, we have heard those names, even on the show. We've been talking to Adolfo, Alfonso. If you ask someone, there's a joke. Someone keeps calling Adolfo Alfonso, and I think it's such a great name. Adolfo,
I need to do that too now.
Yeah, he needs to get a name for this person. And we had Matt Moore as well. The point is, it's so easy to learn because all these people, they're learning together. We are all learning together. There's always something to learn. So making a bit of time to maybe share what you know, but also learn from others. It's so important. And it is one factor which makes the cloud native community what it is. We're constantly improving, constantly learning. There's something happening all the time. If anything, the challenge is, what do you pick to do? There's too much choice. Everyone has seen the landscape. That is impressive. Like creating that, wow, that's really, really impressive. Just the logos, never mind the projects. I mean, each of them is like, there's like so much to them. Okay, so do we talk about the 16-point checklist for GitHub success? Because that's another thing which I stumbled across and I was thinking, wow, this is interesting. That's on the CNCF blog. What do you think? July 8th, that was very recent. Well, relatively recent when we're recording this. I think GitHub is also like on people's minds. So that's like another one, which I thought was interesting. But maybe we go to KubeCon, North America. I mean, it's not that far away. What are you thinking? How are you preparing? And what about masks? I mean, that is like, I just like, what do we know today?
DNS masks, I know that they will be there for sure.
Okay.
That's a certainty that's locked.
Okay.
When it comes to, so many things on my mind for that. And there was, what was it? I think I'm not joking. It was one day after KubeCon, EU had finished up, already had people requesting tickets for NA for their member benefits and such. So it's KubeCon never sleeps. It's always roiling and ready to go. So I'm really stoked about it. And I'm really excited too that it's close by home, close by Cleveland, Ohio. That's where I've been for so many years. I lived in Detroit for a quick stint, and definitely going to talk about that as part of the keynote and the end user update. Might have some pictures from old mascots for the basketball team, the Pistons there or whatnot. But I'll say that for the keynote. But so far, it's going really well. I'm excited about the co-located events. Masks are still a question mark right now. I think that with at the time, there's like the BA4 variant, BA5, the kind of like just making their trips across the world. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens on that front. But like we talked about before, with that data and events and trying to figure things out and everything, post-COVID and lockdown, it's really reminiscent of a build pipeline. And all of these status checks is kind of what it looks like behind the scenes. So like, what do the numbers look like? What is the virologist and all these other people, like what are all these people saying? So it's an interesting space to try to take all that data and put it all together and then make a decision on that front. It goes all the way down to yes or no. And then even with some other cases too, like events I had learned so much about events just from working at the CNCF and going through that KubeCon. It's been one thing experiencing it as a vendor or end user, and then a vendor, and then finally kind of like being inside of that process. So, they work with folks that are vendors and bring people in. So your coffee, your water, all of those things are, have to work through intermediaries, getting the events space, like a lot of, like we had talked about before with the Kubernetes community days in these different regions or areas. There's a lot of work that goes into selecting the venue itself. And like, can this accommodate this? Is it accessible? If somebody has a leg injury or is in a wheelchair or can't see, does this work? Does it have elevators, escalators, etc.? There are all of those kinds of concerns as well. So I know that when I've seen some folks take a look at that and be like, well, let's just do it there. And unfortunately, that's not the case. I would love to, I think with a lot of things in life too, like, let's have a party, but someone has to plan it. And so like, darn it. But I think it gets easier each time. And again, like with the transparency report and everything else, it's the feedback is welcome. The PRs are welcome. The issues are welcome. It's all learning experiences. And so being able to share that and say like, hey, this is like calling out what works and what doesn't in that way that's embodying of the community, that's polite, respectful, is just the best way to kind of get that across, I'd have to say. So, and please, feel free to @ me and let's have conversations too. Like I will absolutely listen to you. I'll take your feedback down and I'll make sure that gets to where it needs to go too. But definitely looking forward to KubeCon NA and meeting all of you there. Please find me. I would love to have conversations with you too. I know that before that we have ArgoCon happening mid-September as well. And so that's going to be in person in Mountain View. I believe that there's a digital component as well, but those talks will all be on YouTube as well. But like I'd said before with Argo, really excited to see what that community is talking about and have deeper conversation with folks there too.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, one thing which is obvious, KubeCon never sleeps. But in between KubeCon not sleeping, there's all these other conferences. There are so many amazing conferences. It's again, we really are spoiled for choice. And it is really difficult to pick and choose the ones that you want to go to because you want to go to all of them and it's not possible. The virtual element helps to some extent, but still you need to make time. and you have to work and you have to have a family maybe, or a partner, whatever the case may be. The point being, it's a struggle, and we are just spoiled for choice. That's what it comes down to. If it was only KubeCon, or like only one conference, it doesn't matter the name, it would be easier. But there you go. A good problem to have. That's how I see it. Okay, so we're still in the summer when we're recording this. What is happening for you next? Do you have holidays coming up? What will make Taylor even happier, if that is possible?
It's like more sun. I have set. So I am a deep reader. I love reading. Please go find me on Goodreads. Share your recommendations with me. I will absolutely take you up on them. My goal this year is to hit 40 books. I think I'm at like 28 or 29, and so far, very excited. Might have to up the goal. It's been a good year for reading. I really like some of the science fiction topics. I really like books on psychology. I just read one called The Body Keeps Score, and that talks about trauma and how people deal with that. There's like really interesting things that they've been able to find, like people that go through certain types of trauma actually end up with autoimmune functions that end up hurting them. So it's so important for you to speak to somebody and kind of like work through those things. Otherwise, it can have really bad effects later on. So same with anything. If your kitchen sink's leaking and you let it go forever, you're going to end up with a problem in the basement, right?
Yeah. Oh, yes.
But yeah, please share on that front. Have some plans to potentially take up surfing lessons and scuba diving this summer too. So really making use of the West Coast. So reading and beaches is in the forefront of my mind for the summer.
What I'm looking forward to is all those pictures. I know that you post a few on, is it Twitter or is it Instagram? Both. Where do you post most pictures?
Yeah, mostly Twitter. I still have to step up my Insta game. I really do. Yeah, I've gotten feedback about that too.
TikTok? I'm not on TikTok, and I don't intend to be, but is it TikTok as well?
I'm following the open source kind of methodology there. Like I'm in the consume phase right now, but I'm about to start contributing.
Okay. Twitter is great. So I'll be following all your pictures from the summer. Others can check them out when they listen, if they want to. I'm just wondering how bright it gets. Like, how bright do those colors get? And where does it go from here? I'm really excited about KubeCon. I'm really excited about all the conference that are coming up. And I already know the follow-up conversation that I want to have with you. How to build communities, how to build healthy communities. So again, I don't know when that's coming, but I'm really excited to dig into that because I think it's so important. It's always the people. Let's be honest. Technology comes and goes. Process, sure, to some extent it's interesting, but that also changes. The people, well, they tend to stick around. And when we build good, healthy relationships, they're the ones that make us happy. And if we were to learn from someone, let's just learn from you. I mean, you must be doing something right with the people relationships to be so happy all the time. So thank you, Taylor, for today. It's been a great pleasure, and I'm looking forward to next time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning into another episode of Ship It. Check out our other podcasts for developers at changelog.com/master. You can connect with like-minded developers via changelog.com/community. Thank you, Fastly, for the worldwide, low-latency changelog.com. Our listeners love those blazing fast MP3s. The Firecracker VMs and the WireGuard integration are really sweet. Fly.io. That's it for this week. See you all next week. Speaking of next week, I'll be at Cloud Native Day in Bern talking about Dagger. Come and say hi.